Good evening, T-Wolves! Mr. Quinton here with what we did today, October 1st, 2020. Fun fact, October 1st, 10-1 is a number that is best, it's a palindrome, works backwards and forwards, and it's one of those rare numbers that you can do upside down and backwards and forwards. How about that? All right, so here's what we did for today, ladies and gentlemen. We talked about urban, suburban, and rural areas, trying to make sure we could define those things and understand a little bit about them. So if we if we pretended that we were in our first period, of course, you're going to go to whatever period you are. Go to quarter one, go to week of September 28th, and then jump into Thursday. You'll see here that we have got a little link to some reading here for you. This is the reading about living areas. All right, so this is what tells you all about urban areas, suburban areas, and rural areas. Urban areas are basically referred to as cities, large, massive areas with a high population density. That means lots of people living together. Often, again, referred to as a city. If you remember back to our previous discussions about cities, Houston is the biggest urban area. That is our urban center. Then you have suburban areas. A suburban area basically right on the outskirts of cities, but usually not too far away. If you think about it, we live here in Spring in a suburban area. Finally, we have rural areas, okay? That would be the country, farmland, all that wonderful stuff. So you're seeing it here on the left, the big cityscape, those skyscrapers. That's the urban area. Here, where you've got a little bit more room to breathe, a little bit more spread out with the houses in the middle picture here, you have suburban. And finally, lots of space, few buildings and homes. Like this farm here, that is rural. But the thing that you need to do or need to be able to glean from this reading is that there are lots of characteristics of of these urban areas and suburban areas and rural areas. But one thing that they all share, ladies and gentlemen, they all share community. They have one thing in common. They have a form of community. That community might be just as simple as in a rural area, the fact that people don't have much other than each other to depend on. So there's one small community. Maybe it has one small church. Maybe it has one small grocery store or one small farmer's co-op. These are reasons and ways that people would come together and form a community around these things. Perhaps it's a little bit bigger, looks a little different here in a suburban area where it's a little easy. While it's easy for us to get around in our neighborhoods, sure, we could walk or ride a bike easily enough to our local park. It might be a little bit more difficult to get to anywhere else. And so we find that we drive a lot of places. And our community comes together around the things that we love to do. So that's why you can build community here in the suburban area around things like, wrestling or swimming. Maybe you're someone who's into soccer. Perhaps you're into gymnastics or cheer. These are all different ways that you express yourself in your community, and you build that around those areas. In the urban environment with those big cities, you have things like here in Houston, you have like the medical center, you would have like the museum district, all of these different communities that can come together based on their need or what their interests are. That's where you can get ethnic communities that might come together, like Little Havana or Chinatown or perhaps the Polish Center. All of these things create different aspects of community because of the different ways they have to connect. In a big urban area, it's easy for someone to maybe walk a few blocks or take a city bus. Certain cities have subways. Here in Houston, we have a light rail system. And so all of these different things allow us to communicate and transport with each other and find that aspect of community that might not exist in the other areas, be they urban or rural. And also, those things that exist in urban and rural may or may not exist in an urban area. So you're going to read through this to make sure you have a pretty good understanding of it. Don't worry about all this extra homework stuff. That's not for you. This is just some note action that you can use to understand suburban and urban areas. Next, you're going to come across our actual first bit of work that needs to be turned in. So this is the Klein ISD Rural to Suburban. So you're going to be able to come in here and use the link in the slides to help you fill in the requested information on the last slide. And what does that look like? Right here, there is a little link here for the history of Klein ISD, a small little, a pretty quick read. Looks like it's a lot, but it's really not. Pretty fast read where you can go through and learn a little bit about Klein. And so you can understand the history of Klein ISD, where we started from, the people who came and founded the area, our first church that was built here, how that grew into a big school community, how we ended up getting an airport. All that stuff is fit in here. And see, it's not a whole lot. So you can read through this information so that you can go through and quickly answer these few little sections, these little questions with sections in them. So if you take a look here, you can see what I've done. I'll show you how I did it on mine. In 1849, you're simply trying to determine whether or not Klein was rural. You can use some information, or rural, I apologize, if Klein was rural or suburban. You can see that I chose that it was rural. And how did I do that? Well, I took a look in my document and I was reading about to see where they might find some information about how that people had the ability to buy 640 acres out this far away. Well, with all that empty space, that's a pretty good way to know that this is actually a rural area. And an interesting fact that the Kleins came from California after the gold rush, that's pretty cool. And then again, you'll move from 1874 to the 1900, and again, you're looking to see, was Klein rural or suburban? Find a little bit of proof from the article, and then find perhaps an interesting fact from the article. Move into 1900 to 1977 and decide again, rural or suburban. Use your information from the article that you've read to determine whether or not you have a suburban community or a rural community. Finally, look at it in today and determine whether or not it's suburban or urban, or rural. So you have all of those to do to get that done. Finally, you'll be able to get into our actual assignment that is for points. So this definitely needs to get done by 11:59 this evening. And that's the urban, suburban, and rural. You're going to want to watch this video. It is a very quick YouTube video. It's only about 4.5 minutes. You can simply click the link from right here. Please make sure that your big blue bubble is on assignment so that you can see the video. Then you can go into your document. Of course, after watching the video, please fill out each bubble with the related characteristics of urban, suburban, and rural. If the bubbles are between terms, then the characteristics should be shared between them. For example, streets could go between urban and suburban. So what that might look like is here, where you can see that urban and suburban are together. So on our left side here, we're looking for characteristics that might be something you would find in the urban aspect. So in the urban area, oh look, so skyscrapers, right? Oh, that's something that you would find in an urban area. And then something that you might find in a suburban area, well, you're probably more likely to find houses in a suburban area. Something you might find in both, again, streets. So that is a way that you can do that. So you're going to look for 3 things that are just urban characteristics, 3 things that are just suburban characteristics, and then 3 things that you think would fit as both, that you can find in both the urban environment and the suburban environment. You're going to do that again here, where we get to talk about rural and suburban areas. Please, if it helps, feel free to use the same suburban ones that you did up here. You can reuse these if you like, and it helps. If you do happen to know some extra ones, that's an extra plus too. So you'll have 3 characteristics that are suburban, 3 characteristics that are rural, and again, 3 that could be shared. So for example, you might put I-45 as something that is shared. Why? Because you have to take the interstate to go. It's a transportation system that you can use to go from downtown Houston to the suburban area here in Spring, and you would still have to go on it to head all the way out to places like Willis or to Huntsville and beyond. So that might be something you would share there. Finally, you're going to be looking at urban and rural. Again, if it helps and you can't think of any more, you could reuse the same characteristics for urban and the same characteristics for rural. Finally, you'll want to find something find three things that they might share, characteristics that they might share. Perhaps an aspect of community that they might share would be a church, because you can certainly find churches in downtown Houston, just like you could find churches out in the country. So, those are ways that you can see how communities might form a bond that are shared between urban and rural areas. Once you're done there, you're just going to simply submit them, and you are done for the day, ladies and gentlemen. So, don't you worry about anything else. Get that in. You are good to go. Thank you so very much for your time, and you have a great day. Mr. Quinton, out.